All right, Woody, thank you. So the last time we talked to Mike Florio, we were wondering after that 28-6 loss at home, what was going to happen. And just a couple hours later, Chris Grier is out, and they end up on the trade deadline getting rid of just one player. Some people thought they'd get rid of most people thought it would be 3 or 4 guys. It was just the one. Anyway, Mike Florio joins us this morning. Mike, were you surprised that Stephen Ross finally moved on the general manager?
Well, yes and no. Now, I am a big proponent in any NFL team for shared accountability between the head coach and the general manager. I think it creates an inherently toxic environment if the coach believes he can blame the problems of the team on the GM, and if the GM believes he can blame the problems of the team on the coach. I think the right approach is everybody stays and thrives, or everybody goes and we start over. A half measure is not an ideal outcome, but dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things. So it doesn't surprise me that that's what Stephen Ross did, because the bad teams have a common thread. The dysfunction flows from the top. Dolphins, Jets, Browns, Titans. Those are the top 4 that come to mind right now, or bottom 4 as the case may be. So it didn't surprise me, but I don't think it's the right solution. I don't think that firing the GM, making the head coach a de facto lame duck, if he even makes it through the end of the season, and I know reportedly he's safe, but that's all subject to change whenever Stephen Ross decides he needs to make another half move and make it a whole move. But it feels like a new regime is coming, and the rest of this season is preseason in advance of 2026, with decisions being made about who's going to stay, who's going to go. And, of course, those decisions ultimately will be made by whoever is hired to be the GM and the head coach, knowing that they have a $54 million cash and cap anchor next year in the form of the contract that never should have been given to Tua. And I'm not trying to be critical of Tua. I'm critical of the fact that Tua shouldn't have received $150 million fully guaranteed over 3 years. That just shouldn't have happened. And the next regime is going to have to deal with the last guaranteed installment of $54 million.
You know, a lot of people think Stephen Ross is looking at this as Tua and Mike being connected together to see how this thing goes the last 8 games. You're not buying into that, are you?
Well, I do believe, Joe, at some level, there's an argument to be made that if we have to pay Tua anyway, one alternative is to not be in the market for a new head coach in this cycle. Because look at it this way. What coach with options is going to want to take that job, knowing that for his first year, he's going to have one hand tied behind his back in the form of a contract that saddles him with a player that he's not going to want. I mean, let's be realistic about it. The teams that change coaches and GMs are teams that have fundamental problems. It's rare that the quarterback isn't part of those problems. It's rare that the new coach says, that's absolutely the guy I want. It was kind of a surprise that Mike McDaniel was so enthusiastic. Remember the FaceTime he did with Tua on the plane? Like
yesterday, yep.
Yeah. So the only time that's ever really worked is for Tony Dungy when he landed in Indianapolis with Peyton Manning. That's a no-brainer. That makes that job more attractive. The Tua contract makes this job less attractive. So if there's a way to win enough games down the stretch that the fans will buy the idea of running it back one more time with Mike McDaniel and Tua, then I think that's at least an option. And maybe that's what Stephen Ross is exploring. Unless the truth is he just felt like he needed to give the fans something at a time when they were disgusted in the aftermath of what happened last Thursday night. So let's give him something. Let's give him a half measure. Let's give him Chris Grier, and then we'll figure out the rest of it later.
Mike, that Amazon Prime coverage of that game, I thought they did. First of all, every time something was bad, they showed the bags on the head. They showed a fan leaving. They showed it was something negative, and they took a shot always back to Stephen Ross in his owner's box. I think that was icing on the cake. I think he's looking, going, oh, my God, and they're coming right back to me on every shot. I'm doing enough. I've had it. You think that could have had something to do with it? You buying any of that?
Oh, absolutely. If that had been a game tucked into the cluster of 1 o'clock Eastern games on a Sunday, it's a much different vibe. Much different vibe. So I absolutely believe that this is one of those situations where a primetime game creates a lot more problems than it solves because it becomes more conspicuous and it creates a national embarrassment for the organization that compels the owner to do something. And I always get a kick out of the whole mutual decision. That became a thing about 10 years ago. Like, what's Chris Grier going to say? Do you really think he wanted to leave the organization he's been with for a decade longer than Stephen Ross owned the team? No.
Right.
But Stephen Ross fired Chris Grier, and we knew something was going to come. We just didn't know what. And it just feels like something else is going to come. And we'll see. We'll see. But that Tua contract, I wrote about this over the weekend, that Tua contract is going to be an impediment to getting the best possible coach and GM that they can when they're going to be in competition with multiple other teams that are looking to replace the two most important jobs in any NFL franchise.
So I want to ask you, a few days later, we got the trade deadline. The Dolphins end up just getting rid of a pass rusher. A lot of people thought they would get rid of a lot more at this point of being 2-7. You see the Jets, they got a whole bunch for two really good defensive players. And I know the Dolphins didn't have that quality of players. Were you surprised they didn't make more moves, though, a little bit?
A little bit. Now, look, there's been so much praise of Champ Kelly, the interim GM, for exercising restraint. These were all ownership calls. Champ Kelly wasn't going to be given the keys to the car because Champ Kelly at some level would have said, hey, my only chance at getting this job permanently, and I think he's got a very, very small chance of being the full-time GM, my only chance is to make moves, to flip assets, to stockpile draft picks, to go out and find practice squad guys who can come in and play well enough that I impress Stephen Ross and Tom Garfinkel and anyone else who's helping make decisions about what we're going to do. So this was ownership saying, no, we're not going to do it. And the difference between the Jets and the Dolphins is simple because people are calling what the Jets did a fire sale. That's not a fire sale. They sold at retail. They came out of those transactions with 3 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and 2 players. That is not a fire sale. A fire sale is taking whatever you can get. If they were engaged in a fire sale, they would have traded Breece Hall. They would have traded Jermaine Johnson. They would have traded Michael Clemens. So the Dolphins had opportunities, but, for Jalen Waddle, I heard they wanted a 1+. And if they don't get a 1+, they're not going to trade him. So they decided, hey, look at it this way. Tyreek Hill's not going to be there next year. Unless he redoes his contract and takes a hell of a lot less than what he's due to make, $36 million total compensation package, he's not going to be there.
Yes,
so you need to have somebody. And Jalen Waddle has proven that he's a high-end talent. He was a top 10 pick. He earned a second contract. You're not going to move on from him just to get anything you can. So I think that's what it came down to. They got value that they deemed was appropriate for Jalen Phillips. And for the other players, they didn't get an offer that they evaluated and said, this is the right offer and we're willing to make this move. So now, again, it's not Champ Kelly. It's ownership saying, I'm not going to just give away my players because we're currently circling the drain and we're going to get anything we can in the hopes of loading up as many picks as possible. So, and the other side of it too, you could always trade guys in the offseason.
That's
and
true.
Maybe you can get more for Jalen Waddle in the offseason because any draft picks you get now, you're still not using them until April.
Right.
You can trade somebody in March and you get the same draft pick that you use in April of 2026.
So, Mike, flipping teams here a little bit, this Kyler Murray thing. If somebody would have told me Jacoby Brissett, who's been on 6 or 7 teams, and he's a South Florida guy, Dwyer High School, it was going to be the starter, and Kyler Murray basically looks like, I listened to some of your stuff you guys did yesterday, he's out. He may never play again, in Arizona.
I would not be surprised if he never suits up for the Cardinals again. When you look at his contract, when you look at the circumstances, when Coach Jonathan Gannon said last Saturday that Jacoby Brissett would start on Monday night against the Cowboys and Kyler Murray could have a role, I took a step back because that was the weekend that we're all trying to figure out who may get traded. Where are the hot spots? And I started poking around whether or not Kyler Murray could get traded before the deadline. Now, it became quickly clear there were far too many moving parts, too many things that would need to be done, not enough teams that would be ready to take on his contract, not enough teams that he'd be ready to join because it's not a rest of the season move. It's a longer-term move if you're Kyler Murray jumping from one team to another. But through the process of investigating that and coming to the conclusion he wasn't going to be traded, I also came to the conclusion he's going to be traded after the season. And it could be when you look at his contract, he's got $39 million fully guaranteed next year. Another 19.5 kicks in on the 5th day of the league year. It becomes like a Russell Wilson situation. Daniel Jones, who else have we seen it with? It was another quarterback, Derek Carr. We've seen teams put quarterbacks in bubble wrap down the stretch because they don't want that extra money to become fully guaranteed. Because here's how it works. If Kyler Murray can't pass a physical by the 5th day of the league year in March 2026, the 19.5 for 2027 becomes fully guaranteed. So I think he won't play again this year. And I don't think he'll play for the Cardinals again. It's just a question of how this relationship becomes disconnected. Is it a trade? Is he released? That's one of the things that moves to the top of the list of off-season quarterback carousel chaos.
Could you see, because I just put Kyler Murray, you're talking about him, we talk about Tua so much here in South Florida. You think they could go on and will play somewhere else and start for another team from the start, not through injury and be a backup, but go someplace as a starter?
Well, let me just throw out hypotheticals and speculation and obvious dot connecting here. The Dolphins are going to be looking for a coach. Last year, Cliff Kingsbury had no desire to leave the Washington Commanders because the arrow was pointing up. Everything felt good. There wasn't an option out there that he felt compelled to pursue. He took no interviews. This year, maybe he's going to feel differently. Maybe he's going to feel after what happens in Washington, you know what? The window's still open for me. I can maybe slip through it. What if he ends up, and I have no idea which way this is going to go. Nobody does at this point. What if he ends up being the next coach of the Dolphins? What if he wants to reunite with Kyler Murray? They were together in Arizona. They made it to the playoffs in Arizona. So that's a possibility, and then you plug Kyler Murray right in. I think there's a fair question to be asked about Kyler Murray as to what his top end is at this point. How good can he be? How far can he go? Is he already in decline? You start to take away the high-end speed, agility, the shiftiness, the things he can do off schedule to buy time and extend plays and zip past people for a 15-yard gain. If that starts to diminish, then maybe he's not attractive as a starting option. I mean, let's be fair. Big picture. He's been in the NFL since 2019. He's been to the playoffs one time. So I don't know. And same thing with Tua. Where is the team that's going to say, this is the guy that we're going to cast our lot with. This is the guy we're going to bring in to be our starter. Not just the placeholder until we can draft someone, but our true week 1 through week 18 starting quarterback. So, the first step is going to be, as soon as the regular season ends, we'll know who's looking for coaches. Then once the coaches land where they're going to land, then we will start to figure out where the quarterbacks are going to go. So, that's what makes the offseason so compelling, because we know there's going to be 6, 7, 8 new coaches, and we know there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks that move. It used to be starting quarterbacks didn't move. Teams didn't want to move on from starting quarterbacks. Now we see teams willing to try to roll the dice to upgrade. So those guys will be in the mix. The first step is, who are the coaches going to be, and are these coaches going to look at Tua or Kyler as their options? And that's why I think it's possible Tua gets traded. But again, Dolphins are going to have to pay a lot of
some money.
Yeah, it happen.
Yeah. Hey, so we got another story down here. It's been a crazy one. It's been going on for years here in our backyard. Antonio Brown, and the latest with him. How bad could this get with the facing attempted murder charges in Miami? And they had to bring him out of Dubai, bring him back here, arrest him. Help me out on that. Put your legal cap on.
Well, I mean, I've done the research into Florida law. It's a second-degree murder attempt. It's a second-degree felony, and under Florida law, it's up to 15 years in prison. So we'll see how this process plays out. Remember, presumption of innocence, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a very high bar. They're going to have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he attempted to kill someone that night when all hell broke loose at the boxing event. And, and also along the way, you don't find reasonable doubt through a trial process if you don't have a client who's going to go along with everything that is recommended. And none of us know when it happened for Antonio Brown. I look at the hit that he took in the playoff game against the Bengals some 9-10 years ago. He took that vicious hit, and I noticed a change in him after that. I mean, I've interviewed him in person both before and after, and there was a difference after that hit. And it's unfortunate. He says himself he's got CTE. I mean, nobody knows. because they can't diagnose it in someone at this point until the person is deceased. But that's going to be part of the challenge. To beat these charges, he needs to be a good client. He needs to be somebody who takes the advice his lawyers give him and acts on it and makes good decisions. He may decide to turn down a plea deal that would be very favorable and roll the dice on going to trial. He may insist on testifying at trial. So there are a lot of things to be determined here. But what we know is this: he was sufficiently concerned by that warrant that he left the country, and he stayed out of the country for months. And now he's been apprehended in Dubai, and he's going to have to face justice on this thing that he initially said. I remember when it all hit social media that weekend in May, it looked like he was the victim.
Yes.
And he said he'd been cleared. And we found out not long after that when they investigated, they realized that they believe he's responsible. And prosecutors typically don't go forward with these cases unless they think they're going to get that conviction by proving the guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Just an incredible story. Just a talented guy to just everything that's happened. We were doing stuff off the field, arena football, furniture throwing, jumping a guy who's moving his furniture back from the West Coast. I mean, it just goes on and on. Anyway, hey, Mike, thank you. Really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk.